Years of community corrections partnership funding that they were able to fund a total of 15 positions for us for the next 5 years, and that includes 12 chat workers.
Okay.
So we're actually in the current process, be 10 chat workers, 2 chat supervisors, 2 mental health clinicians, and 1 analyst to help collect data and evaluate evidence-based practices.
And we have funding for 5 years for that.
5
correct?
years, yes.
Great. Thank you, Chief. I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next is fire. Do we have any fire? They're online? Okay. Hello?
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, Alan Ernst, Fire Chief for the Fire Department. My honor to be here to present our Measure H adjustment. When we went to the community, we identified 3 priorities for the Fire Department with Measure H, and that was to expand advanced life support, decrease our response times, and provide for critical infrastructure and address the deferred maintenance. And I believe what you'll see here addresses all 3 of those. So the first category is under fire EMS, and the request is to increase and expand our advanced life support, which is paramedic service to the community, and decrease our response times. We're asking for, as we expand this program, we got to make sure we have a solid foundation for it to ensure we're successful. So we're asking for the EMS quality improvement coordinator, which most times is the nurse, to come in and evaluate our program and provide training, as well as that quality improvement oversight over the program to make sure with all the regulations that we have through the state and the local emergency agency through the county that we are meeting those requirements. Also asking to add 3 paramedic shift captains to serve as EMS shift supervisors. This will be critical to help reduce response times. They'll be able to respond to EMS calls and potentially relieve an engine company that is there and get them back in the system. A lot of times our paramedics end up transporting patients with the ambulance and get stuck at a hospital. These paramedic captains can respond to the hospital, relieve that individual, and we can get that apparatus back in service a lot quicker. And then we have to ensure that we are meeting all the administrative needs as well, and so we're asking for 1 administrative office assistant to support EMS. The next slide. As we all know, Fire Station 1 has been a priority for the city to address the conditions of that station. So this is asking for an additional $3 million. This is a one-time cost to go towards that project. You saw in the ARPA funding, we already had $2 million dedicated to it. I wish $5 million would take care of it, but this gives us a really good head start to move down the path of finally having a fire station where our firefighters can live in. Currently they live in the building next door, and that has a delayed response time for them to be alerted and then have to walk next door to get to the apparatus. So we'll go on to the next. And then, I think back 1, guys. There we go. Station runner vehicle. I think this vehicle has more duct tape on it now than metal, but we certainly got our use out of this. It has 144,000 miles on it, and this is used to run critical supplies to our 19 fire stations every day. And we have to have a reliable vehicle to make sure our firefighters have the necessary equipment to be able to do their jobs. Everything from oxygen bottles to their SCBA bottles to EMS supplies to firefighting turnout. And so this is a one-time expense that we'll be asking for of $80,000. The full-time public safety business service analyst, with the addition of all the contracts that we've had, we've become a very complex agency. We're actually responsible for 3 separate budgets. We obviously, the Modesto Fire Department budget, City of Modesto, but as non-administrative contracts, we're also responsible for the Santa Claus Consolidated Fire Protection district budget, as well as developing the City of Turlock Fire Department budget as well. So with that complexity, I'm asking to, we're going to adjust. Right now we have a financial analyst position, and so we'll remove that position and add this public safety business analyst, which just gives us a little higher degree of expertise in budgeting and procurement, and will help us make sure that we're meeting all those requirements. And then we're also asking for a full-time hazmat inspector. This will be a safety position, most likely a fire captain in this role, that also supports our hazardous materials team. But there are inspections throughout the county that we are required by the state to inspect for hazardous materials, and even restaurants with their hood systems and et cetera. We have been currently trying to do these inspections under our existing prevention staff. A lot of times our deputy fire marshal has to do these inspections, which takes critical time out of her ability to respond to the public and make sure that we get the plan checks approved quickly and can help businesses move forward in development and building. And so this would free up a lot of her time and provide a critical service of public safety to the community. I do want to point out that this is be fully recovered from the fees of those inspections. And so the $7,900 amount you see on top, that's actually projected to be a revenue, not an expense back. And then the next slide, how these adjustments will impact the community. We've got a couple of graphs for data that just kind of reminds us of why we were communicating with the public of the need to address our response time. Industry standards for the fire service is to have a 5-minute response time to any emergency within 90% of the time. We unfortunately do not make that mark very often at all. As you can see, our numbers continue to decline. In 2020, we met at 81% of the time, and we're currently averaging 76% of the time. This graph shows our ALS companies. So these are the 4 companies that we have paramedics currently on. With the action we took with Measure H money already from this current budget year, the council did approve purchasing more ALS equipment for other fire stations. So one benefit we're already seeing is we're adding more paramedics every day to different fire stations. So we're averaging anywhere from 6 to 8 of our fire stations being what we call advanced life support, which is a tremendous benefit for the community. The next slide just shows that why it's so important that we have a paramedic on a fire engine. It's because 71% of the time we're the first arriving piece of equipment to any emergency. And unfortunately, right now the ambulance services are really struggling with response times, and they get stuck at the hospital quite a bit trying to offload patients. And so not only are we getting there first, but we're remaining on scene for several minutes waiting for an ambulance or an advanced life support. And so to be able to provide that service to the community is a tremendous benefit. Next slide. So addition of the 7 full-time positions that I spoke to for EMS, as well as hazmat inspector and public safety business analyst, these will enhance our ability to provide additional paramedic services, as well as reduce our response times, start to reduce our response times. And it provides a really good foundation as we move forward into next year and look at how we address the response times through apparatus or personnel. And the hazmat inspector, obviously, the increased turnaround time for business inspections and permits, and identifying and mitigating those hazards before they become risk to life and property. The next slide. This just shows the kind of the issue we have within the fire service with deferred maintenance and the years of how old our fire stations are. Again, average age is 47 years. And Station 1 obviously tips that scale at 84 years. And so if we can address Station 1, that will help with our average age, and continue to invest in the maintenance programs for the fire stations will greatly help. So how does repairing Station 1 and replacing a station runner vehicle benefit the community. Again, if you look at response times, it's not uncommon. Again, I already spoke of Station 1. The crews have to walk from another building to get to the apparatus. Because of the size of the existing sleeping quarters, we had to move our ladder truck from Station 1 to Station 2. The ladder truck is designed to be downtown. All of our greatest threats for multi-story buildings are downtown, and so there's a delayed response for that ladder truck. Also, Station 1 is our busiest firehouse, so it's not uncommon at all to have multiple calls at the same time in Station 1, and instead of having two apparatus responding out of there, we have a truck that's responding from over by Modesto High School, so it's a lot longer response. Also, having those supplies in the stations and available through having a reliable station runner vehicle, that will also help us ensure that we can provide that response to emergency calls. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councilmember Williams?
Yes, Chief, on the spending plan recap, which is the second page from the last, for those who have the packet, it does indicate that you were at 4.1 million. And so then my question is, on your first presentation, it had numbers. Your second presentation, it had numbers. Were those also, was the last presentation including the numbers on your first presentation? Because the number comes out to be the same.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
It's not an addition. It's just the
Okay.
addition. It's those two added together.
Okay, so it is 4.1 that you're asking for.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Ricky?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to let the chief know that I appreciate the direction that he's going in the budgeting here. I think that some of your, I like all the priorities. I'm especially excited about the idea of improving response times, about improving Fire Station 1. That support vehicle that's just an embarrassment. So thanks for doing what you're doing on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Ricky. I do have a question, Chief. On the Fire Station 1, you're asking for $3 million, plus you have a $2 million grant already. Is that correct?
That is, well, we have $2 million from ARPA fund.
ARPA fund. Okay. So that'll give you $5 million for Station 1. I know there has been some talk about replacing Station 1 with a new station. With the $5 million that you're putting into Station 1, what is now the life expectancy of Station 1?
Well, actually, I want to make sure it's clear. We have $5 million towards a Station 1 project. So that doesn't necessarily, we're not going to invest that money into the current fire station. It's $5 million towards addressing the issue of having a Fire Station 1. So we're working with the city, and we got one of the plans to get a consultant on board and really give us a path forward on what the public safety complex would look like, where fire stations would be best located, and then design and plans for that. So to be clear, we're not investing $5 million into the current structure.
Okay, so are you going to, are there some Band-Aid approaches you're going to be doing with Station 1?
Very, very limited. We can do that within our existing operating budget, like repairing doors and et cetera. But the focus is to find a new site, new facility, and that way we can keep the firefighters there while it's being constructed and not lose response time.
Great. You've answered my question. Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? If not, we'll move on to, thank you, Chief. Move on to Parks and Recreation again.
Good morning again. Chair Wright, members of the Finance Committee and Council, Lori Smith, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhoods. All right, so we'll start out with our first request is the $151,000 for the annual spring cleanups along major roadways. You may recall that in our quick wins in February, Council approved the appropriation of money to clean up Briggsmore from Sis to Lakewood, Pellendale from Dale to Oakdale, and I believe Sisk from Brenner to Whitcomb. Whitcomb is a new ask, and these spring cleanups started about a year ago. It's been popular. It's done a lot to enhance the visual impact of all those roadways, so we're proposing to include it in next year's
Great.
thank you, appropriation. I mentioned this earlier. We are currently watering our non-CFD parks twice a year. That costs us approximately $1.2 million a year. This addition of $500,000 will allow us to water all of our parks 3 times a year. And of course, this contributes to the tree health, the recreational value, as well as the quality of life and the use of our parks. We are asking for $87,000 for turf renovation equipment for our ball fields and soccer fields. We have 26 ball fields and 17 soccer fields. All of them, as you can imagine, are not in the condition that we would like them to be in. The acquisition of this equipment will assist us in enhancing and upgrading our softball, baseball, and soccer fields for public use, as well as ensuring the safety of the users. This next request is $100,000 for 20 drinking fountain bottle fillers. This will fund the replacement of 20 old leaking drinking fountains in our park system. We're proposing to replace 10 of them immediately in the parks identified there on the screen, and then continue to identify what we know exists and another 10 drinking fountains and bottle fillers. All right, here we go. So the proposal here is for the priority deferred and preventable maintenance needs, large projects. The first year 1, and this falls within the park improvements category of Measure H, is for $8.27 million, and it's broken up into 2 areas. Deferred maintenance, 6.1, which I kind of referred to in the deferred maintenance presentation, and then the priority preventative maintenance program, 2.17. So I'll go into more detail in a second here about our deferred maintenance details, but the preventative maintenance program will allow us to begin it's a 5-year plan that will have a 3-year life cycle, and it'll allow us to keep up with the preventative maintenance and avoid getting into a situation that we find ourselves today. So the $6.1 million will replace 8 playgrounds at 8 parks, upgrade tennis court lighting at 5 parks, replace the sand volleyball court, do some improvements at Isla Loma, removal of the shade restroom canopies at 4 parks. It contributes to the turf replacement at Mary Grogan, 3 restroom replacements, I think I mentioned that earlier, and then some renovation for Maddox Youth Center. That equals the $6.1 million. The preventative maintenance will include basketball, volleyball court, seal and stripe at 11 parks, tennis courts resurfacing at 5 parks, concrete repairs, tripping and hazards, and ADA issues at 12 parks, upgrade security, park lighting at 4 parks, and then parking lot slurry, seal and striping at the museum and 5 additional parks. That's approximately $2.1 million. And this is what it looks like. So what this slide shows you is these projects identified by size. So you can see the legend on the left-hand side had colored dots coordinated with the value of the project. And then above that is the district identification. So, for example, District 1 has just over $1 million. And you can see in District 1 there's some, I don't know the colors, but some larger slides in the size circles, and then some smaller size circles. And you can see that for all of the districts. And the goal here was really to do what we could in addressing the age and deterioration of equipment and amenities, as well as identify throughout the city where these types of projects existed, so that we could be as address as many across the city as possible. The other thing that's noted on here is you will note in District 2, it has $2.6 million, whereas the others are in the 1 to 1.5. And that's because we're getting that $1.2 million in ARPA funding for the Chavez Park. So it has a little bit extra. It's identified by that yellow dot. All right. How are we going to get all these projects done? By continuing our succession planning efforts in the department and reorganizing right out of the gate our Parks Planning and Development Division. So Parks Planning and Development, as you can imagine, is a very competitive field. They have certifications, professional certifications for landscape architecture, and we find ourselves in a position of competing with other agencies. So we did an analysis, we looked at other agencies that we're competing with, and we're proposing the restructuring of this division to both meet that competition and meet what you can see as a very large project workload. So we have 2 project coordinators. Those will be reclassified or are being considered for reclassification to landscape and facilities designers. That'll have 2 levels. We're proposing a new position, associate landscape architect, and this will create a succession planning ladder in this career field. A new supervisory position, senior landscape architect, that'll allow, as I said, continued opportunities for growth. And we are proposing 2 of those, and this is what it will look like. I'm sorry. The total cost of that is $199,853, and you should note that that's the net cost. So the overall cost is more than that, but those expenses will be charged to projects. And this is what the org chart looks like. You can see the planning manager at the top of the structure. That division is supported by an analyst, 2 senior landscape architects with 2 associates underneath, and then landscape facility designers with a 1-2 classification designation for promotional opportunities. I don't know why I keep going backwards. I'm just going to... The next item that we're proposing is a full-time head groundskeeper. You heard me talk a little bit earlier in the deferred maintenance about the deferred maintenance in our ball fields and soccer fields. And we have, of course, Mary Grogan, where we do have a head groundskeeper who works full-time, and you can imagine that field requires a full-time head groundskeeper. This will allow us to have 2, so we can have them stationed at 2 locations, conduct the renovations that need to be conducted, and then initiate the maintenance program that we've talked about. Total cost is just short of $100,000. So earlier this year, in the quick wins for Measure H, you approved 9 new positions in our park operations: a supervisor, 2 mechanics, and 6 maintenance workers. Not included in that were vehicles, and so this proposes that vehicles be acquired. All of our maintenance workers, supervisors, and lead workers have their own vehicle. I stated earlier we have over 1,200 acres of park land throughout the city, as well as 17 miles of trails. Having our staff share a vehicle doesn't allow for the efficiency in terms of covering this territory. So total cost of these vehicles, $622,000. So we are also asking for funding for security for our park sites. You can see the sites located here: King Kennedy, Maddox, Neighborhood Center at Marshall Park, Mansion and Museum, and the Senior Center. Over the years, the security challenges with all of our community centers has increased, and we find ourselves facing continued problems from all sorts of risks associated with homelessness and not homelessness. So the addition of security guards during the open hours will improve our citizens' sense of security. It obviously provides protection and reduce attempted break-ins. So I kind of reviewed this, but in terms of how these adjustments I just requested will impact the community, clearly our deferred and preventative maintenance requests address the park improvements component, and you can see the immediate effects and the long-term effects, and we've talked about those several times in my presentations this morning. Public safety is clearly one of the areas that requesting security addresses as far as Measure H. And then park improvements, having the additional staff will assist us in being able to accomplish the projects we're proposing. And that's it. I don't know why I keep going backwards, but I appreciate your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lori. That's approximately about 10.2 million you're
It
asking.
is $10 million, and we're grateful.
10.2?
10.1.
10.1, and some change, okay.
We
Any-
should have calculators for you guys in the future.
What is it?
You guys are crunchy numbers.
You guys are stealing my thunder. I'm
I
going to
know.
go over it in the recap.
Oh, okay.
That's okay, though.
That's fine. Any other comments?
Yeah, on our proposal earlier, you were asking for 6.1. Am I correct?
So for deferred maintenance, it's 6.1. The preventative maintenance is the
2.170.
That gets the combined of 8.
But yet you still have on your recap that Steve is wanting to, we're stealing his thunder, 10.130,424.
All of these numbers add up to 10 million. So it's the 100,000 for the security, it's the 199 for the parks planning, it's the 87 for the equipment, it's the 8 point, I don't remember, but, so all of those total 10.1.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Alvarez.
I have a quick question regarding those park renovations at Cesar Chavez and MLK. What is the estimated completion date for those?
Cesar Chavez will be bringing to council, to the safety and communities, I think early May, an agreement amendment so that we can have the design is changing somewhat. And so it's still in design. MLK as well, I believe we just awarded that contract. So the expectation is construction will begin next summer.
So we're thinking ballpark 2025, 2026? Ribbon
Not
cutting?
26.
When will we be at the ribbon cutting? Or when do I have to be? 2025 probably? Okay.
Well, I would hope that it is
Good thing you're young.
early 25.
Okay, I've just been asked those questions by my constituents, and I didn't have a date, so
Sure.
I'm going to just guesstimate 2025, summertime perhaps. Safe to say?
I think it's safe.
Okay, thank you.
Right, great, thank you. Councilmember Ricky.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say I think that this is a great vision of a future of our park system. I really like where you guys are placing the money. It offers us a pathway to the future in parks, a brighter future where our facilities are being maintained better and they're safer, and we're giving the community what they expect when they go to a park. And so we got a long way to go. You know, this isn't going to just fix it instantly, but this is a start, and I think that's important.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Escudero Brayton.
Thank you, Lori, for that presentation. I particularly love the fact that your approach is very balanced on the parks of how you're putting them throughout Modesto. You're providing with your colorful one, all the districts it's equitable in the terms and the amount of funding that you're dedicating to improving those parks in those areas. So that's fantastic. Clarifying question on page 46. You have removal of restroom shade canopies, $120,000. Is that replace or is that removal?
That's removal.
Why is it so expensive?
The removal of the structures?
No, the shade canopies.
So
Are those structures? That's not
Yeah.
just the shading?
No,
With
they're
4
they're
poles?
wood, they're framed, and they have the slats across the top. And so at one point, there was actual covering over them, and that has been removed, but they have, many years ago, recreation programming. Oh, sorry. Many years ago, recreation programming took place underneath those shade structures, which was one of the purposes for them. Over time, that ended. The roof covering started to deteriorate. Those were removed. We do not do that kind of recreation programming there anymore. So they're framed wood, and they have to be removed. And so $120,000, is that what you
Yes, that's what you've indicated.
said it is? Let me just look
It just
here.
sounds like a lot.
That's several parks though, right?
4.
Yeah, 3, I believe. But I'm trying to find it right here, but
It's
I
4.
don't.
Trust me, removal of
4?
restroom
Is it
shade
4?
can be at 4 parks.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and
I'm not, 120,000 is
That-
probably not that much.
really?
Yeah.
It's 30,000 each.
I have a cousin that could do it for half. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Oh, my God.
Okay, well,
Fire department, go out there and do it for free.
So
Might be some smoke damage though.
Deanna's watching us.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
If not more questions. You know what, I'm going to take public comment right now because it's getting 25 minutes till 12, and I don't know how many comments we have in public. So if any of the public has comments from any of the presentations so far today, I will ask you to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Seeing none, any in person? Seeing none, we'll move on to Community Economic Development Department. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Chairperson Wright. Okay, Community and Economic Development. So our first proposal for Measure H funding is the addition of 2 code enforcement officers, totaling a little over $150,000. This would bring our code enforcement officers from 4 to 6 to assist with more focused code enforcement efforts, faster response times, and proactive enforcement initiatives. Our next one is for the Rental Housing Safety Program. The Rental Housing Safety Program was approved in 2019 to help maintain the supply of safe, decent, and sound affordable housing, and to ensure that we had sufficient or self-certifications or annual inspections done on those rental units. We anticipate that there are 40,000 rental units within the City of Modesto. What this would do was allow us to have the code enforcement officers, or right here we're proposing consultants, available to do those proactive inspections on those units throughout the city. Our next one is an additional downtown streets team. And so downtown streets team has been in the City of Modesto since 2019. During their time here, they've assisted 236 homeless individuals, 72 who've been employed, and 101 housed, as well as assisted in removing nearly 2,000 barriers to obtaining housing and employment. We currently have a 50-member team, and this proposal is to expand to another 25-member team who will help support the efforts and blight within our parks. So with the addition of 2 code enforcement officers, what it would do is this shows the average case resolution within days. And so adding these 2 would reduce the average case resolution days by approximately 34% to help with the services that we offer our community. The funding for the Rental Housing Safety Program, again, this is a program that was approved in 2019. This would actually launch the program and ensure that we have those proactive inspections for our multifamily units to ensure that our communities has that safe and secure housing that they do within their rentals. And lastly, the request for the downtown streets team would bring an additional 25-member team directly to support park cleanup efforts. An estimated 500,000 pounds of debris and 191 needles are expected to be cleared in the year that this additional funding will help cover. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on these.
Great. Do I have any questions from council members?
Nope.
Nope. Councilmember Alvarez.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment. I want to just highlight great work that you all are doing, and Jessica, that you are spearheading as interim director of economic development. And I want to highlight the rental housing inspection program. That is huge in District 2. My constituents have been very vocal about that to me, and I'm very pleased to see this come to fruition. It's good government, and I look forward to more policies like this being passed in the future.
Great, thank you, and I have a great team to help support these efforts as well.
Councilmember Ricky.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councilmember Alvarez's points, especially in terms of the way this funding is going to help support good housing, affordable housing, safe housing, improving our ability to deliver more housing. These are critical needs in our community. I still get emails every week from people that can't find an affordable place to live. This problem's not going away, and I love the fact that in this budget we're going to be addressing that. That's amazing. And I also wanted to say that I'm just excited overall on how all the different departments in our city are layering on each other, overlapping services that when they come together are going to really improve situations. Like when you look at our parks, right? You look at how Parks is investing, you look at how the police department brought in chat and brought in rangers, and now I'm seeing Downtown Streets team that's going to be investing in cleaning up blight in our parks also. And that's an example of all of our departments focusing on problems and solving them, and I just appreciate the way you guys are cooperating together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question on code enforcement. Aren't we moving that to the police department?
So, following budget adoption, if that's what the council agrees to, yes, these code enforcement officers would bring our total code enforcement officers to 6 and would move to the police department.
Yeah, it just technically hasn't happened yet. That's why you're seeing it underneath CED.
Okay, thank you. And then back on the my comment on the street teams. I'm glad we're adding another team. My next question would be, how many teams do you think we could add, or how many homeless people that we're helping are out there that if we added 2 more teams on top of this, would we have the manpower to man those teams?
So we do have an upcoming meeting with Downtown Streets team and Megan Clifford, so we can get that information and let you guys know.
Yeah, I think it's a great program. It's really giving people a hands up, and we're seeing a lot of great success with it. I know in my community, a lot of people are really happy to see that we're helping people and really getting them back on the right track. So I would be curious to see, if we had unlimited funding, how many teams that we could put together. I think that would be something that we here at the council would want to see. Thank you for your report. If there's no other questions, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break for lunch because I'm sure Bill's probably got about 30 minutes of items to go over on the public works. So we're going to take a break right now. Before I take a break, is there any public comment from this morning and this last presentation? Anybody want to make a public comment? I see no hands. So we're adjourned. We'll meet back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Being 1 o'clock, I call this meeting back to order, and just want to make a announcement that any public comment, please make a note, and after all the presentations before we leave tonight, I'll ask for any public comment. So right now, we'll move on to Public Works. Bill? Welcome back.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Wright and members of the committee. Bill Sandu, Public Works Director. Let's jump into our first request. So citywide, we have 81,000 street trees and about 50,000 park trees. And on every year, we get about 10,000 service calls a year. So we currently have only one person taking all these calls and one part-timer. So our request is, in order for us to process all the requests more expediently and keep track of everything, we're requesting the part-timer position to reallocate it to full-time admin analyst. So admin office assistant position, so that we can process all those calls that come in and be more effective and more responsive, improve our response time and customer service. The second request is additional tree pruning, tree trimming crew. As you know, we have 81,000 street trees, and our current pruning cycle is 9 to 10 years. And industry standard in order for trees to survive and perform better is 5 to 7 years. So this request is to add 2 additional tree trimmers and 1 maintenance worker to improve our tree trimming and bring our cycle down to more industry standard. Also, this crew will be responsible for other duties, stump removal, and also tree planting, tree preservation, that type of duties also. And with that, one-time request is to add equipment for this crew. That includes tower and the chipper that this crew will need to perform, and 2 pickups. Okay, and the second request is also related to forestry. As I mentioned earlier, that we get about 10,000 service calls, and our response time, given our current resources, we made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but our response time is slow. Sometimes those customers need that service urgently, and so this crew's primary duty will be customer focus, just customer focus. So, customer makes requests, and the crew, we're adding a operations crew leader. The goal is this person is certified arborist. This person goes and evaluates the tree, then assigns and sends the team as needed. So that's why this team is a little bit different. So this is, again, our customer response team. I call it the critical attack team. Just go, provide the great customer service. And also, not only customer service, but also the liabilities and the damage that the trees are causable. This team will be mainly responsible for reducing and provide the timely response time to our residents and businesses. 1 operations crew leader, 1 tree trimmer crew leader, and 2 tree trimmers is a request for this team. And next request is outside contractor. As I mentioned earlier, 81,000 street trees and 50,000 park trees. This contractor will perform 2-fold duties. Also, if park trees, there's no trimming. Currently, there's no program pruning on park trees. Especially worrisome is some of the community parks. So this contract work will do about 3,000 to 4,000 trees a year. Half of those will be park trees, half of those will be street trees. So that's what the contract work is, about $1.5 million a year. Half of those park trees, half of those will be contract trees. The street trees. Curb, gutter, and sidewalk. as we discussed under deferred maintenance, we have over 5,000, backlog of over 5,000, which is, I think, about 5,900 to be more exact. And that's a backlog of sidewalk needs to removed and replaced. That's the current backlog. Then we get 200 to 300 annually, the new one. So our estimate at the current contract pricing, $1.8 million will get about 1/10 of this backlog cleared, about 500 of these replaced. And so we also, all our 5,900 locations are prioritized, 1 through 5, 1 being the lowest and the 5 being the worst. So at this point, we have 1,380 locations that are 5. They need to be replaced and moved today. So, and then we have priority 3, 4, which is also, it needs to be replaced as the funding becomes available quickly. It's about 3,500 locations, and the others are also there. So again, we have in our system, this is all in electronic database, and these locations are prioritized 1 through 5. About 1,380 are number 5, and $1.8 million will get about 500 locations done. And we also discussed about our facilities, buildings, coming up with 5 to 10 year plan and priorities. We're proposing a facilities master plan or facilities condition assessment, what we call. So the contractor or consultant will go through all our facilities, and which is about 1.34 million square foot city facilities, and determine, assess the structural equipment like air conditioners and everything else, windows, roofs, everything, and provide us the priorities, that these are the high priorities for 1 through 5, and also a magnitude of estimates also that this is what needs to be done. So this will provide the council 5 to 10 year roadmap for those facility improvements. How will this impact? Tree pruning, our goal is to get to 5 to 7 year cycle. Currently, last year we did about 10,000 trees. Goal is somewhere around 12 to 13,000 trees. We'll say more kind of 13,000 trees to prune. Service calls are pretty much documented also. The goal is, again, it will provide improved customer service and more reduce our response time. And broken limbs, you can see that's been going up every year. If the trees are not maintained, not pruned regularly, not within the cycle 5 to 7 years, you'll have more broken limbs and tree failures. Also, years of drought has caused a lot of issues with trees also. See, the broken limbs last year were about 3,800 locations. So again, this is the goal here is properly maintaining street and park trees, and this will provide the pruning cycle that's needed, and also improve our response time and more proactive approach to forestry, including parks, than more reactive approach. So again, tree inspections, service calls, timely response to Go Modesto emails and telephone inquiries will be the benefits to our residents. And curb, gutter, and sidewalks, here's some statistics that how much we do every year. Again, the goal is here to start attacking the backlog and clear the backlog within as the funding becomes available. Again, the benefit will be quality of life and fixing and maintaining roads and sidewalk, quality of life, ADA improvements, because some of when you have offsets, they don't meet ADA requirements. Also, folks with the strollers having sometimes have the hard time going over the sidewalks, and facilities condition assessment citywide will provide us life cycle analysis for all of our assets and prioritize them and provide next 5 to 10 year roadmap for our infrastructure, for our building. We're happy to answer any questions.
So your ask is totaled at 4.8 million, yes?
That sounds like correct number.
Okay.
Thank you for your report. Any other comments or questions?
I do,
Councilmember.
Chair. Bill, you had mentioned a priority scale from 1 to 5 for sidewalks, for the remove and replacement. Can you describe what the criteria is for a 1 versus a 5?
The 1 is pretty much that we can grind it, still maintain the proper flow, there's no tripping hazard, and still meets ADA requirements. The 5 is that it's not fixable anymore. We either have a asphalt patch there, or we ground to the best we could, and it's non-compliant. It's just basically tripping hazard, and so it just needs to be replaced.
Okay, so through an assessment, or is it on a case-by-case, will you determine which ones rank in 5 and which ones rank in 1, and then everything in between?
That is correct. Staff, as the requests come in, staff goes out and assesses the sidewalk, and either there is a action that we could do. For example, in a lot of cases, we do asphalt patching or grinding. So that's how the staff determines that.
But I thought I heard you say, and I probably misheard, but I thought asphalt is being phased out and we're using cement now, moving forward.
That is correct if council approves the request, because the earlier enhancements from Surface Transportation Fund was to add extra concrete team. So that will be doing those 200 to 300 new locations that come in every year. Rather than doing the asphalt, they will remove and replace with concrete.
So on your presentation, you said that we currently have 5,000 sidewalk locations citywide requiring removal and replacing.
That is correct, 5,900.
So are you saying that those 5,000 plus sidewalk locations, this priority scale will be applied, and based on that scale, will determine the level of work?
That is correct. So we're bringing you 2 separate improvements, 1 ongoing, the new ones, separate team, 1 contract work, which is about 500 locations for $1.8 million start, basically working on their backlog.
Okay, and then you also referenced the ask of the 1.5 million for tree services for an outside contractor. Is this going to follow an RFP process?
This will go through the process as this is, I think, ongoing request. It could be multi-year contract. It will go through the process.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams.
You almost called me Wilson again, didn't you? On the additional forest crew, what's the percentage of increase of work guesstimation with being able to bring on the forestry crew? Is that going to be a 15, 20% uptick on being able to get services out there, 5%? What do you think?
So I would have to say with all the requests, it's increased in about 30%, because currently we prune about 10,000 trees a year. The goal is to go to 12 to 13,000 trees a year.
30% is a good number.
12,000 to 13,000 a year. That's our goal.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions pertaining to the trees and sidewalks. What's your estimate? How long is it going to take to get us to normal? We're now, we've fixed everything in the past, now we're just maintaining.
So the request we have is $1.8 million. That will get estimated about 500 locations done, but that will still leave 4,500. So it'd be a 10-year cycle.
About a 10-year cycle?
10-year cycle.
And then back to the sidewalks, you've got 500 that you really need to get on top of. Some of those sidewalks that we have done work on and we've got asphalt down instead of concrete, are those going to be a priority to go back into those and redo those?
That is correct. Those are part of the 5,000 backlog.
Okay, great. Fantastic. And see what else I want to ask. I think that's all I have. Any other questions from any council members? Is Councilmember Ricky still on? No. Okay, seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
So, Information Technology Department.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Wright, Honorable Finance Committee members, Scott Kahn, Chief Information Officer and IT Director for the City of Modesto. The IT Department has one Measure H item to share. We will be adding an IT principal for public safety, basically an IT manager and leader specific to the police and fire department. Currently, we have 6 resources that are focused on public safety, 4 of them in our infrastructure division, doing the network, the hardware, the servers, those types of things, and 2 application analysts that are focused on the software utilized by our public safety agencies. They both report to 2 different people. So when public safety needs to come and get a project done, a lot of times it's difficult to know who to ask. We intend to bring those 6 resources underneath this single IT public safety principle and give them leadership and the ability to prioritize and make sure their efforts are being combined and worked on correctly, leveraging the resources in the proper manner. What's the benefit to the community? Multifaceted. This is designed to better support our public safety departments. Okay, as the public safety technology leader, this person is going to make sure that those resources are married and that they are prioritized correctly. I expect this individual to be the driving force behind the program technical management of implementation of our new dispatch center going forward, which will allow our public safety agencies to directly control the dispatch resources to the appropriate calls and calls for service. I also expect this individual to lead the charge in delivering innovation to our real-time crime center and continue its evolution and improvement as a proactive crime prevention and crime-solving tool. This will be the single authoritative technical voice within the IT department that I and my other divisional managers will turn to say, what does public safety want? What does public safety need? And how can we resource it and make that happen? In essence, this has been one of the things 11 months ago when I was hired that was first identified to me by our public safety department heads. And they said this would be a wonderful addition to getting us on the right track and leveraging the resources. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council members?
Looks like your total was 138,000. That one's definitely not on your.
Yep, that
Okay.
would be the fully loaded range for this particular individual, dependent upon their experience level.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sounds good, good call.
Sounds good. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Measure H, administration support.
Okay, so I said I would be back, and here I am. I'm going to go over the admin support adjustments. So what we did here is we kind of grouped the different administrative support areas and wanted to bring forward the adjustments that would go into those categories. So these are the different departments: city clerk, city manager, finance department, human resources. The adjustments you can see before you, they include some positions. and then some increases for the marketing communications budget in the city manager's office. So we have in the city clerk's office the unfreezing of the deputy city clerk position, the additional marketing communication budget in the city manager's office. In the finance department, we have the restoration of a full-time assistant buyer, the addition of a full-time account clerk position, and then in HR, the addition of a human resource assistant position. So the idea behind this is that with all the additional programs and infrastructure improvements that you have heard today before you from the other departments, there's going to be some additional administrative support need across the organization. So some of these adjustments in this table before you will address some of that. So in the city clerk's office, there's going to be increased workload from public records requests, some of those other items, purchasing capacity in the finance department. So how will those adjustments impact the community? So in the city clerk's office, pertaining to that adjustment for the additional deputy or the unfreezing of the deputy city clerk position, there's going to be increased volume of work to support those additional programs created by Measure H. The addition of the Measure H Oversight Board is going to draw some additional time from the city clerk position, so there's going to be additional duties that will need to be handled by that deputy city clerk position. Public records requests, additional office duties in that city clerk's office will be handled by that deputy city clerk position. In the human resources department, the addition of that HR assistant will allow for increased customer service support at the public-facing HR counter and via phone. Increased employee engagement and retention, training, development opportunities, all will be handled by this new HR assistant position. In the finance department, restoring those positions for the two positions that were added. You know, there's going to be additional audit requirements defined by Measure H. Those positions will provide accuracy and oversight for those in the purchasing area. And then on the customer service side for the additional account clerk, managing timelines, paying vendors, all additional needs through the creation of those programs, paying invoices for the vendors to get the different infrastructure improvements and projects that we're going to be creating through Measure H. So again, kind of a quick overview on those admin support adjustments. The total there, $385,000. Any questions on that before I go to the kind of the recap for the spending plan?
I noticed you had your totals, didn't you? You must be the finance manager.
Yes.
Go ahead, Rose.
Throughout this presentation, it has been proposed a multitude of new personnel, new, what do they call it, RFEs?
FTEs.
FTEs.
Full-time equivalent, yes.
Yes. So, and we've factored in salary for that, but it doesn't stop there. There's benefits and there's a multitude of fiscal impacts to those bodies being hired. How does that impact our fiscal stability?
So all the positions that you've seen here and the cost for that includes the full impact of their salary and benefits. So those are fully loaded.
Okay.
Yes.
So the numbers we saw were fully loaded
Fully loaded
numbers.
salary and benefits, correct.
I see. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. We can go back to the,
I have a question, but I'm going to wait after you're done.
okay. Just two more quick slides and then we'll be at the end. So just the spending plan recap. I know Councilmember Williams, you've been checking this slide out. So just again, looking at the overall categories, you can see the spending breakdown. We've seen this slide or that table a couple of times. Again, parks improvements, public safety, the forestry, equipment, sidewalk. You can see the different categories of expenditures totaling up to that $27.1 million. Parks and Recreation, you can see the breakdown on the department side. The number there is a little bit different because in parks improvements, or in the Parks and Recreation neighborhood, they had a few things that were defined as public safety and some of the other categories. So that's why you see a little bit of difference in the totals for Parks and Recreation and neighborhoods. But we wanted to break down in terms of what departments were spending in terms of this Measure H spending plan. So you can see within each department, Parks and Recreation, Police Department, Public Works, Fire Department, and so on, the breakdown of that $27.1 million that's being proposed in terms of this Measure H spending plan for the new fiscal year. Then the last slide, I do want to say that I've been the budget manager for quite some time here in the city. Since I started, we've been doing reductions. So again, thank you to the citizens for passing this. Now we get to actually show some improvements and growth. So I know I don't have any operations, but I'm really excited for that. I consider myself an honorary member of all the departments here, so I get to enjoy some of that excitement that they're seeing now that they actually get to go and improve the city of Modesto. One of the things we will be doing as we go forward, and thank you to Andrew and his team for creating this logo, the improvements that we go out and do make, if we get this spending plan approved by council, we will be putting this logo out there to show that there's your Measure H funds being put to work. So citizens will be seeing this as improvements are made throughout the parks. We'll put it on everything that we can. I don't know how we can put it on a curb, but maybe we will. So
We stamp it.
exactly. So we'll stamp it out there to show that these improvements are funded by Measure H every which way we can, just to show that the citizens that these funds are being put to use. And again, we will have the Measure H Oversight Board auditing this in the future, so that's something that will be coming up in the new fiscal year as well.
Thank you, Steve. I think one of the things we have to remember, and our public needs to remember, this is in addition to our normal spending that we already have in place. Correct. So this is not our total spending for these areas. This is a addition to all of our different programs that were out there on a regular basis. So this was going to really give us a head start on getting on top of a lot of our deferred maintenance and parks and trees and public safety and everything that in the past have got pushed aside. So this is fantastic. Any other comments from any staff members or any council members? Nope. Yes.
Yeah, just real briefly, so this spending plan, if approved, will form the basis for the oversight committee. As I've stated a few times, we really wanted to make sure we separated out what was our normal budget versus what Measure H spending. The oversight committee will really be monitoring that we're spending it in accordance with the way we said we spend it. I feel very comfortable and confident that we've met that target with the recommendations that are here before you today. We hope to have the oversight committee in place probably by the end of May, maybe early June, and then we'll hold our first meeting soon thereafter where we'll go through the spending plan. The job of the oversight committee is really just to see whether or not we are spending it in accordance with what we said we were going to spend, and then they will be able to look at our financials that track back to the various spending plans that have been proposed.
So, City Manager, are we expecting that committee will meet probably once a quarter, semi-annually? Or?
Yeah, I anticipate them to meet more frequently early. Like maybe in a few years, it'll lessen how many meetings that they need to have. But initially, there's going to be a lot of education that will take place, a lot of reviewing of how our budget works. You guys got a dose of some of our lingo and jargon today. We'll have to educate them on that. So I would anticipate much more frequent meetings early on, just so they can go over what our actuals to date are.
Councilmember Scooter-Brayton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe, for that that information. That's very informative. In regards to the this recap of our spending plan, this is for fiscal year 23-24?
Correct.
Okay. And it is estimated in this fiscal year 23-24, what is the estimated annual revenue that Measure H is likely to bring in?
For the fiscal year for 23-24, it's $41.8 million.
So if it's estimated that Measure H will bring in 41 million and change, we're proposing the spending of 27 and change of it. What will happen to the rest, the remainder?
So if you remember, we had, and we'll go over it again when we kind of recap everything, but we had I can't remember which presentation it was, but we showed the chart where we were talking about kind of Measure H. I think it was actually in this presentation at the beginning. What would be left over at the end? So we talked about there would be that $14.1 million, and that takes into account the $10 million. I think it's go down a little bit, Scotty. Wow, one more. Yes.
Of course, it would be that chart.
Yes.
And that was complicated for
Yes.
me.
So there's the initial quarter of Measure H revenue that we're going to be receiving this year. So the sales tax started in April. So from April to June of this fiscal year in 2023, we're going to receive an estimated $10 million. Council approved an initial spending plan in February that we were obligated $4.48 million of that $10 million. Okay? So that reduced the $10 million down to $5.52 million on that chart. So that line 3. So let's stop there. We have $5.52 million
Without
left.
numbers, can you
Without-
tell me what's going to happen to that leftover money?
That just rolls out. Let's just say that's fund balance for Measure H.
So there will be a remaining balance?
Yes.
And it rolls over?
Yes.
Okay.
So that 5.52
I
will roll
understand
over.
that.
Yep.
And it's part of our strategy too. So we know there's only so much work we can do this year.
Sure,
Right?
of
We only
course.
have so much staff, so much resources. Even with the positions we have, it's going to take us time to hire these positions. And so as we've talked about multiple times, more one-time up front and ongoing later. Well, our one-time needs aren't going to go away when we start allocating less one-time funds in the future. These funds will be set aside for future ongoing deferred maintenance costs, preventative maintenance costs. So we're building up our reserves in a way for
Yeah.
those additional expenditures later on.
Well, that's a very fiscally conservative plan, very good plan. Thank you. Spending plan recap as well. Of these spending line items, how can we identify what is one-time expenditure and what is ongoing?
So if we go up one more slide to slide 6. So up here in the top chart, the top table, if you look at the Measure H spending plan section, you can see what's one time and what's ongoing. What I'll do for when we bring this back to council, because I've already thought about it, because that question has come up. One of the exhibits for the proposed budget, if committee decides to take this forward and bring it forward to council or move it forward to council for approval, one of the exhibits I'll prepare is a exhibit that shows the Measure H spending plan, all of the adjustments that are part of it, so you'll have all the detail, and it will say what's ongoing and what's one time.
Beautiful.
So you'll have that exhibit, we'll bring that forward as part of the proposed budget.
Okay.
And I think just kind of very simply, right now, if you look at those two ongoing lines, you have the 3.2 million and you have the $8.3 million. So we have only allocated 11.5 million of ongoing expenses to date, and we're bringing in $41.8 million in revenue. So we've only allocated $11.8 million that will be ongoing into the future. So that means next year, we'll have the $11 million that's already done, and then we'll be able to add more ongoing costs. And we're going to do that slowly over time, particularly in the public safety arena, as we're able to fill police officer positions.
Great. Fantastic. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, I'd like to thank our city manager for always continually making sure that the public understands that we are going to be true and true when it comes to the spending of Measure H. In every meeting that I can think of, he has always emphasized that this is what we're going to do because this is what they asked for. So I truly want to say thank you to the city manager for always keeping that on the forefront. And I think this was a great workshop. And to our employees, particularly the department heads and their team, outstanding. I know that I do a whole bunch of things. However, when I see what you all have put together, I just wonder how you even get some sleep. So thank you for all that you all do to make this a beautiful presentation, and also with clarity, compassion for our city, and in the right right frame of mind and in the right spirit. So thank you to all of the department heads and, of course, those who work underneath you. And Chairperson Wright, thank you for guiding us, and I'm sure we're getting ready to close out here pretty soon.
No, we got,
Oh, I guess not.
you're, we're not ready to close yet.
Almost.
Almost,
So, yeah.
all right.
So, you know what, I'm going to open it up right now to public comment, since we're pretty well done with all the presentations. I know we have a few more things to do. So I see one hand. Jenny?
You cannot get rid of me. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You can't get rid of me. I run out of time that I can run there, but I'm still listening. Now, I have 4 quick questions. They may have been answered. I didn't realize I could write them down and call. So, for Brian Gillespie, how many motorcycle policemen will we guarantee you so we can get to better traffic control?
That's one. What's your second?
Okay, that's one. The next one is for Lori Smith. Was any money put aside for the McHenry Museum? We have really neglected that, and I think that's really important because it's the archives of Modesto, the city of Modesto. Another one is for Bill Sandu. I don't know if he mentioned this. Is the high voltage completed? And if not, how much is left? And then in the city clerk's office, I'm so glad that we hired someone else, but we also need to get the archives and all the written stuff into a better location and on something other than paper. And I just want to say that I am so thrilled that the city of Modesto had the courage to pass Measure H. This is the first time I can remember that we have money to put aside for deferred maintenance. We have not had that for years, I think even going back to 2008. The whole time I've ever been associated with the city council and the budget, we've never had that much to put aside, and that's why we have so much deferred maintenance out there. The streets, the sidewalks, the trees, the parks, So anyhow, thank you guys. Wonderful job. I really enjoyed this and hope I'm not putting a lot of pressure by asking these questions. And it was a great workshop, and I enjoyed being part of it.
Thank you, Jenny. Police chief? Let's start with the motorcycles.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, and great to hear from you, former Councilwoman Kenoyer. We currently have 4 traffic officers and 1 sergeant assigned to our traffic safety unit. My goal is, as soon as we can shore up our patrol and hire more officers, is to hopefully this coming fiscal year to at least double that to 8 traffic officers. But in reality, where we're working to go is towards where we were back in 2007, where we were nearly 20 officers assigned to our traffic safety unit. So that's the direction that I want to go, but the short-term goal is to double our traffic unit officers from 4 to 8.
Thank you. Lori?
Thank you, Chair Wright. Good afternoon, Jenny. Your question was regarding whether or not we had requested any Measure H funds for the mansion and museum. Not specifically, but we are partnering with Public Works and they're building facility assessment. Those 2 structures will be part of that, and we expect there will be some improvements in deferred maintenance projects as a result of that.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
Well, thank you for that question, Jenny. So some good news. I know this was one of your favorite projects, high voltage circuits. We completely agreed with you. We started with 735 high voltage lights, and so far we have converted 555, 180 to go. So I'm hoping by sometime next year, we will have all of our high voltage circuit completed, converted into regular voltage and LED. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, and who was the fourth?
That was me, City Clerk.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Good afternoon, Jenny. Thank you for your question. So City Clerk's office is working on scanning some of our legislative records. We've scanned, I believe, resolutions back to 1911. Those are posted online for the public. We're slowly working our way back to 1884. So as soon as those get scanned, we'll put them on the internet. In addition to that, we have a plan. We have 179 rolls of microfilm that we plan to digitize and index and make those available to the public online as well.
You said 1884?
1884.
All right. Yes, I think that's it. For any other public comment before we move on? Seeing no other hands. Steve, go ahead.
Okay, we will move on to the next presentation. There were some report back items that were asked for during the workshops, so we will start with those. I will kick it off. We had the question of how many funds does the city have. So you'll remember this chart during the overview presentation that showed the operating funds for the expenditure budgets and a list of the funds that we have. Some of them are consolidated together. This chart represents the 84 funds, counting the Measure H fund. That will be a new fund going into the new fiscal year. I just want to note that those are the 84 expenditure funds that we have, but there are 107 city funds. The reason that there are 107, only 84 on the expenditure side, there are some revenue funds that are just only housing revenues. So.
Okay.
How many CFD funds do we have? There are 21 different CFD funds.
Thank you.
And then I will turn it over to police.
All right. And we're just following up on the question about how much the police department spends in fuel costs. And so the upcoming fiscal year, the fleet billing for us will be $667,217 in fuel costs for the police department, which equates to less than 1% of our budget. And I think even the current fiscal year so far, I think we were well over $500,000 in charges so far.
I'm surprised. I was thinking it would be a lot more than what it is. So.
Yeah, right. And definitely, we're in the driving business, right? It's what we do all day. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Bill?
I will go next. The question was an update on bulky item pickup program. This is a brand new program implemented, went into effect March of this year. First month, there were, I believe, a couple of appointments. So for this month, which is second month, there are already 3 bulky item pickup appointments. So this staff's done a good job going door to door, door hangers, education, and we keep working on it. And it seems like each dumping or illegal dumping we can avoid on our streets. It's good for the city and saves to the city. And also, here are the expenditures. A lot of it, as you can see, it was $180,000 from ARPA funding. A lot of these expenditures went towards education of this program. And also education on illegal dumping, how to avoid that. And so $180,000, and so some of that went back to, that money went to haulers for disposal and pickup. So just additional information on the same question, the program details, and $180,000 expenditures. You can see towards the end, $80,000 is towards disposal. The items get picked up and they need to be disposed. So that's and some of the brochures that we both in English and Spanish. And so another question was on drop-off event, effectiveness of that event, and that event was very, very effective. And during the last event, we collected 44.65 tons of that all the materials, including mattress and bulky item, trash, e-waste, and tires, 44.6 tons. That is a lot of material we collected, and the good news is this event was fully funded by Caltrans, by the state. And we provided all of the coordination and staff time at our own cost. So it's been a very, very effective event, and the data shows after event, illegal dumping goes down.
Great.
All right, so some information about that same event, the brochures and things like that, the education part. And another question was on the fuel contracts terms. You can see Vendapol, they provide us a renewable diesel for buses, transit buses. Their agreement was signed in 2020. February of 2020. It was this 5-year agreement for renewable diesel, and the facility, bus maintenance facility, has two 12,000-gallon tanks that we use for diesel. And there are some smaller tanks that we use, for example, compost facility, and some of those remote facilities have smaller tanks for their off-road equipment, and majority of our fuel for vehicles, pickups, and trucks you see on the roads comes from contract with Boyd. So they are provided fuel card. Each vehicle is provided fuel card, and that's how they go to different Boyd sites and other sites, and that's how they get fueled. And their agreement, which is also at the very discounted rate, most of our agreements are at their bulk cost plus few cents. I believe in this case they're 9 cents per gallon. So they're very, very effective agreements, and their agreement was signed March 2020 and is good for 5 years, can be extended for additional 2 years. That is our fuel. I think that's all questions for Public Works.
I have a follow-up question. I noticed that your users are assigned a PIN number if they go in and fill up their truck and stuff. How do we monitor that, or how do we do an audit on that to make sure that make sure it's not being misused?
That's a great question, Council Member, and this is actively monitored. So not only the PIN number they will need to fuel at the pump, they also need the vehicle mileage. So they read the meter there and enter the vehicle mileage.
Okay.
So that data gets transmitted to fleet, which they monitor it. Okay, this vehicle was driven 100 miles. How can it utilize 50 gallons, right? So those are actively monitored, and we get all that data.
Fantastic. Okay. That answers my question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina.
Good afternoon. The question that was posed for HR was, how many vacancies do we have currently? And so before you see our total positions. So these are our total allocations that we have is 1,311. Out of those 1,311 allocations, we have 162 current vacancies. It's about 12.4%. I do want to make the additional comment, though, that 23 of these vacancies are actually newly created positions. These were brought forward with the quick wins just recently, and so we're actively recruiting for those right now. And you can see by the chart the total number of positions per department and the total number of vacancies for each of those departments.
Great.
Additionally, I brought another chart that just gives you an idea of what those general fund vacancies look like. So these are the vacancies that are just general fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm good. Any questions for any council members? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Wright, Finance Committee. So the question that we're answering is how can we provide a 5-year history of the water and wastewater fund? And this is what we have in terms of the reserve level. So you've seen with rate increases, you can see that we have gradually increased our reserve amounts in the water and wastewater funds. However, I will also say that these funds are used to pay for our capital improvement projects. Because we're not financing any projects, we are cash funding from reserves to pay for our capital improvement projects.
And what's the total on the water fund? How much we have budgeted for this coming year for capital improvement? About 30 million?
About 30 million. Our capital improvement program does range year to year depending on the size and complexity of projects, but we see anywhere from projects from anywhere from $20 to $30 million a year.
Okay, and then on the wastewater?
Similarly.
Similar?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then I was, following this, we were asked to, for the same 5 years, can we provide a list of projects that were completed with water and wastewater funds. So this only goes from 2017 to 2022. You have 27 projects in water worth $65.1 million. And then on the right, you have the wastewater funded projects, which is 21 projects at a value of $107.2 million.
Wow.
So this chart doesn't really help a little bit because what we do is when we consider a completed project is when council accepts the construction project as complete. So as you can see in 2018-19, we accepted $65 million worth of projects, but in the following year, 2019-2020, there were no construction projects accepted. A lot of that has to do with a lot of projects were still in construction. What's not shown on this chart is there are 2 projects in water and in wastewater that were accepted by council in the fiscal years 22-23 of $11.9 million in water and $3.2 million in wastewater. And then also doesn't reflect the amount of projects that we have in construction right now, which is 9 projects in water worth $33.3 million and 12 projects in wastewater worth $88.3 million.
And Will, do you have a ceiling on the reserves?
Yeah, the city financial policy is to keep a minimum of 25% in reserves. However, for utilities is roughly about, you try to want to keep about 6 months to 1 year of operating costs in reserve. And that's to make sure that you're able to meet any type of emergencies that do pop up.
And what would those numbers look like?
For water, it's about 60 million, roughly about 55 to 60 million. And I think wastewater is roughly about 40 million.
So we have quite a bit more than, we're up there.
Right, we're up there, but it's also to make sure that we maintain good financial policies, and then we also have a pretty good bond rating because in case of emergencies, and that we need to fund any projects.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And who's next? Jessica.
Okay, so I came to give kind of the overview of development user fees as well as the specific questions regarding building permit fees. So a little bit of overview of the development user fee. It's a fee related directly to a project paid for the developer or builder to cover the cost of service, and it's housed in the general fund. So little history. In 2003, they conducted a development user fee study, and they accepted 100% cost recovery for most services. In 2011, we had the Fees Task Force that maintained subsidies for some of the fees, and those are currently subsidized, and they modeled that in 2019 as well. So overall, the cost of a building permit for a single-family home averages about $45,000. Of that, $28,000 are city fees, and then the remaining fees that are just below $17,000 are from other jurisdictions. The fees that would be accepted or would be updated by this increase would be a total of the $23,792, or the fees highlighted up there, which would result in a $1,843 change. And again, this is just for a single-family home. Oops.
Ours, mine isn't highlighted.
I think it's the next page. So I had 2 pages of the tables. Yeah, no, that's okay. We also wanted to show that kind of in a pie chart as well. So as you see, those that are highlighted are the ones that would be updated Again, the 12% of the fees are the development user fees itself, the 38% is CFF, and then the rest of those fees, which are 50%, will not be affected. In comparisons, in 2018, when we did have the Comprehensive Fees Task Force, we reviewed 9 comparable cities, and Modesto ranked 4th out of the 9. And then what we did is we reached out to other jurisdictions surrounding Modesto to see what type of inflationary index they had in place for their development user fees. In regards to the cost recovery for land development engineering, 23 of the 33 fee categories are not at full cost recovery. So again, approximately a 61 to 85% cost recovery range. And some examples of those are encroachment permits, wall permits, and then LDE itself as a division requires a general fund subsidy, which is just under $600,000 to support these activities for the next fiscal year. In regards to building permits itself, the general fund subsidizes maintenance projects that include the HVAC installation, some plumbing, electrical, water heaters, etc. So some of the smaller building permits are the ones that are actually subsidized. And then lastly, the current number of building permits that are in the review right now are 325, and then we broke them down by the type of permit as well.
Great, fantastic. When you talk about an 8 or 9% increase, that seems like a lot, but when you look at the actual fees, it's only going up, from $45,000, only going up $1,800, because a lot of those fees have remained the same, or they're school bond fees or county fees or whatever that it's not reflected. So I think that's important to really get that in our brains to realize it's not going, the 45,000 is not going up 9 or 8%. It's only a fraction of those. So, and I should know because I served on both of those fees tasks, 2011 and 2019. I was on both of those committees. So that was important to keep the fees current so that we don't have a situation like we had back in 2011. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Hello again. Lori Smith, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhoods. There were several questions related to the fees, deposits, and usage of the mansion and museum, so I'm here to try to respond to those. What you see on the screen above you is an example of rental rates for both the mansion and museum. So for the mansion, you can rent the first floor of the mansion, the basement, and the garden with a 5-hour minimum for $1,034, and each half hour after that is $97. The deposit that's required is 1/2 of the full rental amount, not less than $100. For the museum, you can rent the auditorium. There's a 2-hour minimum. It's $250, and then each half hour is $39. The main floor, the auditorium is in the basement. The main floor is a 4-hour minimum, $800, and each half hour is $131. Same in terms of the deposit. And regarding the deposit, as I said previously, half of the deposit is half of the rental amount. Half of that will be retained if our staff determines that damage has been caused to the facility, or if there's an excessive cleanup, and this is of course determined after the walkthrough when the event is over. We do have some other fees, an administrative fee if you do make a change to your rental contract. I don't have a date on that, but I know it's after the reservation has been made. It's a considerable period of time has gone by. We also charge an administrative fee if we're processing the securing of your insurance for your event. And regarding insurance, the price for that ranges determined on the number of attendees, anywhere from $87 to $358. And if you're serving alcohol, there is a $63 fee. So this is what it looks like in terms of the last 5 years of events at this is the mansion. So you can see in 1819 we had 164 events, 1920 it dropped to 86, and you'll recall that we shut down in March. So you can see that a significant portion of our events take place after March, and that's February through June. In spite of COVID, we managed to have 9 events in 2021, and those were held, of course, outside in the garden. 21, 22 started to see recovering, and then the current fiscal year is through February, and so the expectation is we'll be exceeding and hopefully reaching our 18-19 results. This is the museum. Doesn't have the same level of rentals, but you can still see it follows the same pattern. Although there's no outdoor venue at the museum, so there was actually no events in 2021, and we're starting to see some recovery. But there's some work that can be done to increase those.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
That's the first round.
Yeah. Is that a part of stealing my
That's why I don't
thunder?
get a name tag.
Is that a thunder
You're all nervous, huh, Steve?
No, that's why they don't give me a name tag ever, because I drop it.
Is he like that at home, Deanna?
thing? She's not in here, I don't think.
All right. Just eager to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are now on to the last presentation, where we will recap everything and go on to staff recommendations. So again, a lot of information this week, the last 3 days, but we just want to kind of go over a brief recap, starting with, again, the overall budget for the city, the operating expenditure budget, $525.9 million. You can see the breakdown of all the funds that we have. Again, major focus on the general fund with a little breakout chart there, a table showing the revenues, overall revenues, 178.1 million. You can see the taxes that we bring in, sales tax, user utility tax, property tax, the fees, so franchise fees, construction revenues, all the departmental revenues, our transfers in. And then on the expenditure side, so a total expenditure budget of $184.3 million. You can see there we have a surplus, or excuse me, a deficit of $6.17 million. So again, that surplus, the idea behind that is that's being covered by some of the Measure H funds. We talked about our proposed non-Measure H adjustments. Again, the breakdown between the general fund side, some positions being added, some program improvements for totals of 5 new positions for $473,000. Again, that's added to the general fund side of things, non-Measure H. And then we had some non-general fund adjustments as well for the non-Measure H side. So those being paid for by the funds noted there. Across Water Fund, Central Stores, Center Plaza. And those are all presented during the department's budgets. We talked about a recommended change to our general fund unassigned reserve carryover policy. So our current policy is the 1/3 policy, where 1/3 goes to emergency reserves, 1/3 goes to the pension trust, 1/3 goes to deferred maintenance. The new policy would switch that to a 1/4 policy, with the new quarter of that going to the innovation fund. Again, the idea behind that is the innovation fund could be used for the council to decide to bring in maybe more economic opportunities for the city, just things that bring Modesto more opportunities to bring it forward into the future, just things to improve Modesto. So that's what the idea behind that innovation fund would be, in the splitting of the unassigned reserves carryover at the end of the year, at the end of a fiscal year. Some of the proposed reserve allocations. So this is some new information. We're looking at the unassigned fund balance is $9.9 million. That's what we currently have in unassigned fund balance. So we haven't done anything with our unassigned fund balances just because of the pandemic. We didn't really know what the nature of our deficit would be in those pandemic years. So we didn't assign that fund balance. So it's left unassigned of $9.9 million. We had additional carryover that we're estimating at the end of this fiscal year. Right now, we're estimating it about $4 million, so that would be added to that amount. So we're projecting an unassigned fund balance of $14 million. What we're proposing is that we would move $4.7 million into the emergency reserves. So right now, our emergency reserves sit at $18.4 million. The idea behind this is that that would get us closer to that GFOA recommended level. So if you remember, we talked about it briefly. The GFOA recommends that we have 2 months of our regular general fund expenditures, operating expenditures, and reserves. For the city, right now, that's about $26.4 million. So even moving this $4.7 million into the emergency reserves, we'd still be a little bit short. That would bring us to $23.1 million, but we're a lot closer than we've ever been before. So this would be a good move for the city to do that if the council decides that. So if we take that off the $14 million, that leaves us $9.3 million. We would recommend leaving about $2 million in unassigned. That would just leave the council some flexibility to have $2 million in an unassigned fund balance for if a situation came up where they wanted to appropriate some fund balance for a program or things like that. You wouldn't have to make the move to assign it from emergency reserves. It's in a category of unassigned. That would leave a remaining amount of $7.3 million, where we could then do the policy of moving those into the pension trust, deferred maintenance, and that innovation fund. So that puts a healthy amount into the pension trust. Right now, I think if you remember, and Christina gave the presentation about our pension, in the pension trust, we currently have about $2.5 million. So this would add an additional $2.1 million into our pension trust. We started out with an initial $2.3 million that was deposited from all funds. The general fund contributed, I think, $1 million. And then we've contributed $500,000 annually to that since then. And that was established in, I think, January of 2022. So again, establishing more funds to the pension trust. We'd put some money into the deferred maintenance, $2.1 million. And then really kicking off that innovation fund with that $2.1 million. That will leave a remaining $1 million. This could be put towards an additional payment to CalPERS to, again, smooth out that obligation that we're seeing in that chart that Christina had about the pension costs rising in the future. So this is a proposed reserve allocation plan. I think the city manager wants to add something.
Yeah, sorry, Steve.
That's
to
right.
break it. I want to make sure I note. I understand that this doesn't exactly follow with the financial policy that we are recommending with a quarter of everything going to the different funds, but we felt like we have a higher unassigned fund balance than we normally would in typical years, and we really wanted to make an attempt to get closer to that 2 month of the GFOA. That's why you're seeing the additional dollars to the emergency reserves, and if there are additional funds later, we would be making that recommendation to continue to fund the emergency reserves. And then the additional discretionary payment to CalPERS, we will be able to leverage that money with our non-general fund funds as well to make an even larger payment to CalPERS, because we feel like that still continues to be a drain on our city's budget, and making those additional discretionary payments helps draw us down the interest, which lowers our payments in the future. So while I just want to recognize that this doesn't follow with the policy that we're recommending, but I wanted you to hear the reasons why we're making those recommendations. It's just good financial policy.
Councilmember Williams, you have a question?
And this is absolutely no Measure H money.
No, this is no Measure H money. This is existing general fund balance.
Just wanted to make sure the public knew that. Thank you.
Great.
So we talked about the Measure H spending plan. You've seen these charts and tables before. Again, this is focusing on the new allocation of the $27.1 million that we've discussed in new Measure H spending plan funds as presented to you throughout this process and in the special presentation. One of the other things I think that Councilmember Scudia-Brayton brought forward or asked about was, can we get kind of an overview of the position allocation changes in this draft proposed budget? So I did want to bring that forward. This is a summary of the non-Measure H positions. This is all of them. So in the non-Measure H side of things, there's 10.75 positions for a total of $556,000. And then just so you can see on the Measure H side of things, what's being proposed, there are 54 new positions for about $5 million in funding.
Great.
So some of the other things too, you'll remember we had some special presentations on the engineering, or we had an organizational structure changes presentation where Christina talked about the new engineering division. There was an MPU moving to the police department, and then there were some classification changes. Some additional position allocation changes as part of that were in the engineering division. There'll be the creation of an engineering director, an executive assistant, and an AOA 3 in that. So those are 3 additional positions. There was also the equipment, hardware, software maintenance presentation, and then the American Rescue Plan Act presentation where we talked about the reallocation of some ARPA funds to new programs. So I want to mention those because those will come back when we talk about the staff recommendations. Before I move on to that, I know we've had a long week, so I do want to thank all of the committee members, the council members for your attention, your very good questions that you asked during this entire time. I want to thank the mayor and the city manager, especially for all the hard work that they did on the budget and building this budget. I got to thank the department directors and all of their staff for all of the hard work and for putting up with me during the budget process. And I have to thank my staff the most because without them, this would not get done. I know I stand up here as a figurehead, but I gotta thank Marvin Chan for all the work he did, Casey Culbertson especially for all the hard work and hours she has put in, because I am, again, just the figurehead, the pretty face, but they do all the hard work.
Well,
The rugged, old, handsome face. But again, thank you to all of them for all the hard work that they put in. Very much appreciated because, again, this would not get done without all of their hard work.
Thank you. You know, I want to thank staff also. This is my second year to chair this particular finance committee and the budget. And every year the light comes on a little bit brighter every year when we go through this because it's a lot of stuff sound familiar. Presentations were excellent. It really gives us some good information on what's being done. I've always said this, we have great staff, especially our management staff and every department head. You guys are doing, in my opinion, an awesome job. You're very attentive to this council. When we ask questions or want answers, you're always getting back to us. And we feel that, or I feel that you really love this city and you want nothing but the best for the city. So it's a pleasure for me, and I know other members feel this, to serve on this council with this leaders that we have in our city. And I'm just, don't you think about leaving and going anywhere else.
That's right.
Because we'll be out the door and we'll have you chained to your desk. We're not going to let you leave. So anyway, City Manager, you have any comments?
Yeah, I was just going to echo the words of Steve, but I will give Steve a lot of credit. He's working tirelessly to put this budget together. This was unlike any other budget year. You know, usually we have to make tough decisions, but to actually turn this corner and be able to start allocating funds to be able to really improve and strengthen this community it was a challenge, but it was also very, very exciting. I know our departments are up to the task. All of their staff for all the hard work that they put into putting this budget together. It was a lot of hours. There was a lot of agreements and disagreements, but I think at the end of the day, we put together a plan that's really going to move this community forward. I'd also like to thank you, Chairman Wright, and members of the committee and the council who attended this. It was a lot of information to absorb. But I think these were some of the best workshops that I've had in my 6 years of being the city manager. And just appreciate everyone's time, the thoughtful questions, and really the collaboration that we've all had in the development of this budget. Thank you.
You're not going to talk about how handsome you are either? Okay.
If I may just, everything has been said, so I won't repeat the accolades, but it has been, job well done, everyone, from the top to the bottom. It's been so impressive. The level of detail and hard work and the midnight oil that has been burnt so that you could present this data to us, it's exceptional, and thank you. I can't, the words have been said, so again, thank you for a job well done. Exemplary.
Okay, I'll open up to the public. Is there any public final comments before we move on for the motions? Seeing no hands, any public in chamber? Seeing none here. So we have 6 motions in front of us. So do we do these one at a time, or can we do them all individually?
And do we read them?
Okay. Will City Clerk please read motion number 1?
Motion number 1, motion accepting and forwarding onto council the final review and adoption, the draft proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 operating and multi-year budget for the City of Modesto.
Motion.
Second.
And I just note that that includes the Measure H spending plan as well.
I have a first and a second. Call the roll, please.
Alternate Committee Member Williams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. Motion
two.
number 2.
Motion number 2, motion accepting the city's pandemic recovery strategy, Modesto Forward, for the reallocation of the American Rescue Plan funds and authorizing the city manager or his designee to carry out the necessary steps to implement the programs and funding allocation.
Motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alternate Committee Member Williams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Aye. Motion number 3, please.
Motion number 3, motion accepting the changes to the city's financial policies as it relates to the general fund, unassigned reserves, carryover at fiscal year end, and forwarding to council for approval.
No motion, please.
We're alternating here.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Second.
Roll call, please.
Alternate Member Williams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Aye. Motion number 4, please.
Motion accepting the payment of various equipment maintenance agreements for fiscal year 2023-2024 with multiple equipment manufacturers for all city departments for an annual cost not to exceed $896,155 and forwarding to council for approval.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you.
Alternate Member
Aye.
Williams.
Oh, aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Aye. Motion number 5, please.
Motion approving payment of various software hardware maintenance agreements for fiscal year 2023-2024 with multiple vendors for all city departments for an annual cost not to exceed $6,435,813 and forwarding to council for approval.
Motion
So-
to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Alternate Committee Member Williams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Yeah, who was the second?
I
I thought you made the
motion.
motion. Right,
And then-
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And number 6.
Motion approving the changes related to the reorganizations as specified during the budget workshops and forwarding to council for approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call,
Alternate
please.
Member Williams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Scutia-Brayton.
Aye.
And Chairperson Wright.
Aye. Motion approves 3-0. This concludes our finance meeting. Everybody have a great day.
All right.